Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's open the meeting, please. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who've joined us today. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn their phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Just to also add that there is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park, which is at the back of the building. I would remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed, should be being live streamed now, and a recording will be placed on the Council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. I would also at this meeting like to welcome Kate Pereira, who has recently taken up the position as the Director of Schools at the Catholic Diocese of East Anglia. She joins us today as the new representative on the committee for the diocese. We are required to formally co-opt Kate so that she can take a full part in proceedings going forwards. So welcome, Kate, but may I ask you, as a first act, would you mind briefly leaving the room so that the committee can vote on that co-option? Thank you. Welcome, members. We are just voting on the co-option of Kate Pereira, who stepped outside briefly. She is the Director of Schools at the Catholic Diocese of East Anglia, and if we co-opt her onto the committee, she can take a full, participate fully in the meeting. Are committee members content to co-opt Kate Pereira as the Catholic Diocese of East Anglia representative in accordance with statutory requirements?
Agreed.
Is everyone happy? No objections? Thank you. Could we ask Kate, please, to come back? Kate, well, thank you very much. You are most welcome. You are co-opted and you can participate fully in our meeting. Thank you very much. So item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies for absence?
Apologies received from Councillor Damarie Homan, substituted by Councillor Young.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No. Thank you very much. On to the minutes of the 3rd of June committee meeting. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of June as an accurate record. Does everyone agree that it is an accurate record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Are there any dissent? No, thank you. That is carried. We'll take the minutes as approved. An updated minutes action log was included in the papers. Are there any questions on the action log? Now, I have an action log question myself, which is from the 14th of January meeting, minute 251B. It's marked as ongoing, and I would like to ask, please, the director, please, what exactly is the action and why is it still ongoing? Is it something that could be closed?
Yeah, the action was the officers agreed to feedback the comment and see how this could be incorporated, and that feedback was done.
Thank you very much. Can we amend the minutes to reflect that? Thank you very much. Otherwise, are we happy to take the minutes action log as noted with that amendment? Oh, thank you. So next we come to public questions and petitions. There are no petitions this month, but we do have a public question. The question is from Ms. Day, who is a local resident. Ms. Day, you have up to 3 minutes to address the committee with your question. When you're ready.
Oh, just that one. Right, can you hear me?
Yes, when you're ready.
Right, okay, that's there we go.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing me today. I'm here today representing the experiences of children and families across Cambridgeshire who are being failed by the SEND system. The evidence is clear. Delays in issuing education, health and care plans, inadequate or inappropriate alternative provision, and chronic underfunding are causing real harm to children's education, health, and well-being. We have families reporting children out of school for months, even years, mental health crisis, missed qualifications, and little or no support for therapies that they are legally entitled to. Multiple Ombudsman investigations and upheld complaints highlight that these are not isolated incidents. They are systemic. Staff shortages, under-resourced services, and flawed data modelling, including issues with safety valve funding, mean that promises made to families often do not translate into delivery. Sensory services and therapeutic support, critical lifelines for vulnerable children, and under threat due to budget cuts. Families feel gaslighted and blamed, adding further distress. These failures are not just administrative, they have lifelong consequences for children and families, and they erode public trust in the Council's ability to deliver statutory SEND duties. My question is, what immediate actions will the County Council take to ensure that children and young people with SEND receive the support they are legally entitled to under their education, health and care plans? Thank you for listening to me. I've also got an anonymised case example pack, which I'll send out to every member after the meeting. And thank you very much when I've done it within 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Day. You certainly have come in within the 3 minutes, and you've asked a very clear and very important question. We are going to give you a proper written response to that question, which we'll issue at the very latest within 10 working days, but hopefully sooner. Thank you very much indeed for coming. So if I may move on to the next item on the agenda, reprocurement of minor works, of the minor works contractor framework. Before we consider this paper, I believe that Martin Perbrick would like to make a couple of points.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, good. Before I go into the detail of the paper, I'd like to notify committee and to apologise that officers are withdrawing recommendation D for consideration. Consequently, any references or discussions related to that recommendation or to Appendix 1 and the porting of funds in the body of the report aren't relevant. The reason for the withdrawal is to allow time to provide further assurances on the porting of funds, both to officers and to members of the committee, before asking members to make this key decision. For clarity, recommendation D has been withdrawn by officers, and we will proceed to discuss recommendations A, B, and C.
Thank you very much. So just to be really clear about that, there has, unfortunately, after the papers were sent out, there has been a consideration by the officers that actually it's only appropriate for us to consider aspects of this paper, the elements relating to recommendations A through C, to disregard recommendation D and Appendix 1. They will, there will be further consideration of those matters at a future time when further work has been done. So may I hand over again to Martin to outline the matters we are considering today. Pardon, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, can I ask when this was known and when this was reported? And secondly, I did raise this at following the spokes meeting, and we had a long discussion at the spokes meeting, that I don't feel entirely comfortable that an officer is removing something at the last minute. To me, it's another example of the membership of this committee not being in control of what's going on with the day-to-day activity in this area. Now, I'm not casting that at Martin or anybody particular in his team. I'm just saying that culturally, I don't feel this is right. I think we should have more governance and oversight of what's coming to the meeting, where we're at and where we're going. So I'm very intrigued to know when this, if this was made at 11 o'clock today, I fully understand. But if this was made a few days ago, we're all on email. We all could have been contacted accordingly and given this information, because I'm sure I'm not the only member that's done a lot of reading and a lot of research to come to this meeting today.
Thank you, Martin.
It was known post the publication, but not today, not this morning. It was earlier than that. But the bulk of the reading in this report is still relevant. So 75% of the recommendations are still going forward. And like I said, I apologise for the raising of the issue belatedly. But rather than asking members to make a key decision when there isn't been the assurance necessary, then that's probably the safest course of events. But apologies again.
Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. Without going into a discussion over D, can I ask the implication for the two schemes that were going to be using a porting system, and whether or not this will have an impact on the timing of the delivery of those schemes, please?
No, we don't anticipate so. We hope to have this work clarified very swiftly.
Councillor Tom.
Good afternoon. Could I just try and pin officers down on when this decision was made? Because we were told it was earlier than this morning, but we weren't told precisely when, and that seems a bit flexible. Although I do empathise with the fact that situations change and being an officer is a complex job, I really share the sentiment that I think changing recommendations at the last minute puts councillors in difficult positions and means we can't make the most informed decision that we could make. Because, I mean, at the top of my head, I think I know the implications, but had I known this before, I would have loved to have read through this again and tried to see, did it make any impact on the rest of my mind? So it'd be great to know a bit more about why this wasn't presented to us earlier by email.
Yeah, the decision was made last week. I'll find the exact day for you and let you know.
Thank you. Concerns are noted. May we move on to the main matters of the report? Martin.
Thank you. So this paper recommends the reprocurement of the Council's minor works framework. Having a framework in place allows swift and value for money access to a range of contractors for lower value maintenance, condition and expansion schemes. This is necessary because the Council has a rolling programme of capital investment for the provision and maintenance of educational facilities for Cambridgeshire. The programme is funded through a combination of Department of Education Schools Condition Allocation Grant for maintenance and improvement of maintained schools, Community Infrastructure Levy, Section 106 contributions, the Department of Education Basic Need Grant and council investment for expansion projects. The proposed framework structure provides opportunities for locally based small and medium enterprises to bid for a place on the framework, which will provide opportunities to the local supply chain. This approach has already proved successful in reducing the amount of time required to procure individual projects and to ensure suitable professional advice is provided for each scheme undertaken via the minor contractor framework. Secondly, this paper recommends the reprocurement of the relocation of temporary buildings and associated groundworks contract. This contract exists to undertake the movement of temporary buildings, mobile buildings across the council's education and corporate estate. Temporary accommodation is frequently required to deal with sudden, unexpected or unplanned temporary increases in the school's admission number or in response to an emergency. The award of this contract will ensure that the council has a single supplier to undertake all work in relation to the relocation of council-owned temporary accommodation. I'm joined by Sarah Callaghan and Alison Kramer at the back for any detailed questions as well.
Thank you very much. Can I open it now for any questions of clarification? Bradnam.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin, for the summary. Could I ask, I don't think it's commercially sensitive, but could I ask how many, well, if you think it's commercially sensitive, then just say so. But to what degree, how, what quantum of work are we talking about here? Are we talking about, you know, like 50 a year or 50 classrooms, or is it just a very small number for the classrooms?
The temporary for the mobile structures.
It will depend on the situation because some of these are a response to emergency issues. So it's not known at this stage how many there would be in the course of a year because they are generally in response to situations that arise during the year. But there is an overall value for the contract, for the whole of the contract on the frame for the year, which is expected to be in the region of £1 million.
Thank you. The question was actually, what is it in an average year? So it's sort of retrospective question.
Ah, right. Okay. We'll come back to you with the detail on that because it does vary year to year. So, and I don't have the average to hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other points of clarification? Councillor Young.
Well, more of a comment, but this sounds like a very sensible grouping together of repair works and in a beneficial framework for the council. So, sounds great. Thank you.
Councillor Tong. Sorry, do you want to make a point on it? Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Yes, we've seen this building up of a bank of bodies who can provide specific types of work for us as very useful and a way of saving money. And like Councillor Young, I would think this sounds a very sensible arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack.
Yeah, kind of ditto with one added bit, really. I think this is an eminently sensible way of going about business. I think it provides you on almost a conveyor belt of availability, which I think is a positive thing for the work in hand. However, with that comes check and balance. We're dealing in a very volatile industry around anything to do with building contracting is a very volatile industry, as we know only too well with our arm's length company. I think it's time. I think we need to make sure that in here somewhere and in the contract terms are regular reviews with the people on the list to make sure that maybe they've not been successful in the first couple, but they are still available for the next one that comes along. Otherwise, we're all wasting time. So I'd like to see some degree of check and balances in there on the occupants of the list. But I do think I agree with my colleagues opposite that this is a sensible way to go about the business.
Would officers want to comment about that? The review to engage with suppliers that's been suggested, is that already built in, or is that something that you can think about, please?
Yes, we can certainly take that away and respond on that. And I think sort of putting the work in now means that we've got suppliers who to go onto this framework would have met our required standards of quality, experience, capability, accreditation, and passed all of those checks. So it is a robust way of going forward to do this. But definitely we will take that point and respond on how that works in terms of the framework.
Yes, because I think the point is not so much the first point of due diligence, but it's the ongoing due diligence because circumstances change. Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Goldsack, I think it would be really good to see what process we have in place in order to see how well contracts are carried out, how well schools feedback regarding contractors and how they work with them. But also, can we also look into the use of subcontractors? I know with other contractors, we contract one big company and so much work is subcontracted out, and we struggle then to ensure that the council is getting value for money and a decent outcome for some of its works.
Again, would you like to comment, please? That's a really important point.
Yes, thank you. And in this proposed framework, we have got lotting, and we have separated out mechanical and electrical from the main building work, so that we do have that less subcontracting within the process, and we have increased the number of lots to address that point to some degree.
Thank you very much, Mr. Purbrick.
Yeah, I was going to mention the lotting, but also that the framework ensures that we have a compliant route to the marketplace. So anything that goes on there means that we've fulfilled our procurement processes fully. It also enables us to track and monitor the bidding activity of companies on there, Mark, which I think Councillor Goldsack. So we can track the who's bidding, who's not bidding, who's being successful and who's not being successful, as well as getting feedback on the quality of the work that they've done on the interim. So it does give us a lot more information than just being a framework.
Do you want to come back on that?
If I may, and hopefully it's a positive addition. This all sounds eminently sensible. I'm not sitting here knocking it. I'm trying to just make sure that we've got the check and governance in place to make sure that we're ready. To that end, and noting or trying to note the duration of the contract, is it possible that this committee could just get a quick update, say every 6 months, on the progress? I mean, I'm not looking for war and peace. I'm just looking really, it's along with what Councillor Goodliff just suggested. You know, that we found this company is using subcontractors and effectively acting as a master agent. Well, that's not giving us the best quality and the best bang for our buck. So we just want to make sure that those things are in place, and that all the companies that started this journey with us remain on the journey through the duration.
If I may, can we reflect on that and maybe discuss it in spokes? Because I think that it depends how you
With due respect, Chairman, this is the place to make those decisions, not spokes.
Well, it's an update, isn't it? So it's not a decision.
No, I'm asking for an action to be added to bring forward to future meeting. I didn't think I was asking too much. I really don't. If officers want to tell me that's too much work, then I'll listen. But I'm looking at, we're making a decision here based on your suggested approach. I'm hearing large agreement for it across here, but all I'm saying is, can we have an update on it rather than waiting to the end of the contract and the next procurement round to go again?
Councillor
Young? Well, I support the idea that we should be reviewing the contract. I think we need to be careful that we are not, as councillors, we are not running operational matters here. So I think it's fair enough to ask for a review, but every 6 months implies a much too detailed a review into something like this. I mean, I think it would be fair enough for a review in a year's time to see how it's going, perhaps, or a bit later on, but not every 6 months. I think that's over. I support. I mean, I can see your desire to make sure things are going well, which I commend that. But I think we need to be assured that those checks are in place, that officers are doing it, rather than doing it ourselves.
I think we're having an agreement that we need a report back or an update. on progress. I guess the only question is for what time period, and we'll reflect on that, and it won't be longer than a year. May I ask, I think we've got Councillor Dieter, got a question?
Thank you, Chair. So I think, yeah, it all sounds very sensible, and I agree. It's great to have some reporting as well. My question is, I see you've considered local government reorganisation, and it says officers have considered this. I was just wondering if there's some sort of report or kind of data showing why of the time frame. I know it says considered and determined, but I just was wondering if there's any more detail into this, please.
Who's going to answer that one?
Can you find the reference for me? Just want to make sure I answer the exact same right question.
Sure, so it's under 3.3.
I wondered, Martin, if it's the more general comment about, contracts being novated, so there's implications obviously for all of our contracts with regard to local government reorganisation. And so we have a principle whereby those contracts would be novated to that new footprint, whatever that footprint would look like. Would that be correct to say, Martin?
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you, that's great.
Thank you very much. I think the sense of the meeting is that there's very much support for this. There's interest to continue to see how it is going. There's been some suggestions about, engaging with suppliers, which I know you'll take on board. With that in mind, how are we all satisfied that to approve the recommendations A, B, and C? Does anyone have any further questions before we move to the vote? Councillor Sidlow.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I agree with all of this in principle, and I really like the framework support of local SMEs. That's great, keeping the contracts in the area, keeping the money in the area that's being spent by council. Really approve of that. The only thing I really wanted to speak out on that one I noted was the amount of stuff about carbon calculation and carbon reduction that's within the item, and what I was wondering how much that carbon reduction is weighted when it comes to deciding on procuring contracts, because it seems to be factored in quite heavily, and how much that might add to contracts and how much that might cost the taxpayers.
The weightings in the assessment process will be, there will be a sort of compliant procurement process used that will set that out when we move forward with each of the tenders for the contracts that we let. But I don't have the exact detail on that to answer now, but we can respond on that more fully.
Yes, if we could get the numbers and how much it affected the price of the contract, and if it was swayed by net zero factors, which you'll all be surprised to know I don't really subscribe to. The other, no, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, but there's an action to get back. Thank you very much. Councillor Tong.
I would just like to note that I am not particularly surprised that a Reform councillor is a bit sceptical about climate-friendly policies, given the people that the Reform Party tends to get its funding by. Just wanted to have that on the record.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. I was just wondering what the break clauses are, and do we have them in there? Because obviously if contractors don't perform, we want to break the clauses.
Yes, it's all set out in the framework, the details for each of the tenders, what the sort of performance expectations are and the quality standards, etc. That is all set within the framework.
And how will that be managed?
Each contract is managed individually. Once they're off the framework, each contract will be managed individually. It'll have a contract manager who will review performance on that line, the timeline for delivery, the quality of that delivery, and that will be summarised at the end. But if there are problems on the way, which mean that the project is going to fail or there are significant worries, they'll be addressed with the business. We'll try and find a solution, but otherwise the clauses will be there as set out in each individual contract.
Councillor Sidlow.
I was just going to ask whether those break clauses apply with the local government reorganisation, and when there's potentially a change in control of the unitary authorities that are coming, whether those break clauses could be used.
So the contracts will remain absolutely the same. They'll just be novated to the new organisation wherever that may land. The new organisation then has the opportunity to review its own contracts that it inherits, if you like. So, yeah.
Thank you. So, unless anyone else has a sort of burning question, can we please proceed to the vote? Co-opted members of this committee are eligible to vote. We're being asked to approve the three of the recommendations, A, B, and C. Would those in favour please raise their hands? And I guess that's unanimous. So there's no one against and no abstentions. Thank you very much. May we please move to the next item on the agenda, Music Education Fund Hub Funding Consortium Agreement. This is a proposal to extend the consortium agreement. Can I please ask Sarah Callaghan to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. So in October 2024, Children and Young People's Committee agreed the consortia agreement between Peterborough City Council and Cambridgeshire County Council, and the arrangement has worked over the last 12 months without any issues. So since then, a further round of funding has been committed from the Department of Education to continue the support through the Music Education Hub. So committee is therefore asked to approve the extension of the consortium agreement between Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to enable Cambridgeshire to access and distribute the funding awarded by the Department of Education via the Arts Council for the academic year 31st of August 2026 from 2025 to 26, and to delegate responsibility for extending the agreement on behalf of the Council to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. So just by way of summary, the value of the grant that we receive is around about 1.2 million. But positively, we've just heard that the allocation this year will be slightly higher. So whereas the breakdown between Peterborough and Cambridgeshire previously was that we received through Cambridgeshire 836,000, this year we'll have a slight increase, which will take us to 918,000. The grant benefits 23,000 children and young people across Cambridgeshire, and the activities that are supported through the grant are listed in section 3.3 of this report. The terms and conditions of the grant are such that the Music Education Hub cannot be delivered in isolation by one local authority, and that's why we're coming to committee to ask for the consortia agreement to be extended. So I'm happy to take, and Matthew's here to support us in terms of any questions about the value that this brings to our children and young people. It does list, as I've said, the numbers of projects within 3.3. Some of those are universal and some of them are targeted towards some of our children with additional needs. So we're happy to talk to those points if that's useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Matthew Gunn, Head of Cambridgeshire Music. Councillor Whelan.
This is too much as a question as a statement. I think it's good to see that this is being extended for another year, if it's approved by us. I was privileged to attend the summer concert of the youth orchestra and was impressed with the quality of the music and performances and the dedication of the adults who work with these young people. Music is an important part of leisure and education. Not only is it good for mental health in young people, but also is a strong teaching tool as it incorporates maths, history, languages and critical thinking, concentration, problem solving, social skills, listening to others and working as a team. My question is, how much more are you doing with SEND children going forward?
Yeah, so we have a focus on that, as you would imagine, at the moment. We have we've been doing specific targeted work with particular groups of young people, those who haven't been able to attend school because of whatever reason they're unable to go at the moment. We've done a pilot on that last term. We expect to run more of those groups over the next year because it was very successful. We've got work ongoing on a regular basis in both mainstream and special schools, either with our arts therapists or with our instrumental tutors who work in a therapeutic fashion with a number of young people. That is growing significantly year by year. Crikey, I've got to reach for a whole load of things. We are hoping to have next summer, and I need to check with my colleagues whether that's still on track, a special weekend which is entirely devoted to music making for SEND groups, with a quieter day on the Sunday for those that need it. So there's a whole range of things that are ongoing at the moment, and with a little bit of an increase this year, that will help us, I hope, with that particular focus. It's one of those sort of interesting issues where you're actually trying to balance the continuity of things that also have to keep going whilst trying to tackle new emerging things you want to do as well.
Thank you. Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. I think this has partly been answered already, but I was just wondering, Matthew, if you can fill out a little bit of what you've managed to do in the past year, how many young people have been impacted, and what feedback you've had from our children and young people who've been able to access music.
Well, we're still picking up data from last year, so I think you will get a more annual report sort of format in the next 4 to 5 weeks. But we've worked with many thousands of young people across the year. Some have been on a regular basis, week in, week out. Others have been through particular projects. We worked with Gabrielle Raw in with targeted work in the Fens and East Cambridgeshire earlier in the year. Wisbech creates with Britain Symphonia. So we have a wide range of partners as well as the work we do ourselves. I think we've probably done well over 40,000 hours worth of delivery across the whole year. So it's substantial, but it'll probably be easier for me to quantify properly when I've got the data all to hand. So that's off my head.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good to meet you. I'm really impressed with the examples of the activities that you've given us on page 42 and before. And I just wanted to ask if you could explain, do individual schools apply for funding for different activities? And are you able to ensure that this funding goes equally, to all schools all over the county and not just in specific areas?
Here we get to one of the fun difficulties of the whole process each year. Thank you. So in terms of individual schools applying for grants, no, that's not how the hub works. The Strategic Hub Board looks at a programme of delivery for both Cambridgeshire and obviously Peterborough as well each year. That has to be put together based on the needs that have come out of our studies of both the data and our research with schools to actually say, well, okay, what emerging needs are going on here. So there's a programme of access that's available throughout the whole county. However, which schools elect to take advantage of that is entirely down to what the schools decide to do. So we can do so much, but we can't require somebody to to pick up an opportunity that's provided. We've done targeted work in particular areas where research has showed that there's less take up at the moment. So you won't be surprised to hear that there's a focus on the Fenland area, and we are doing further research this year into Huntingdonshire because we believe there's a bit of a gap in that part of the world at the moment as well from our data. The process of developing new activity in those areas takes time, because we only have a certain amount of additional funding available to say, right, we need to do more here, but that's how we go about it. So we have examples of growing work in the Wisbech area at the moment, and also I think we've done some further work in the Littleport patch as well, and Chatteris is starting to come, but it takes a long time, particularly when things have dissipated over a number of years before. To rebuild that takes a little time. Did I answer both parts of that? I can't remember.
Yes, you did. And I just wanted to observe how really important music is, because it cuts across culture, education ability. It cuts across whether people are good with their hands or good with their heads. Mathematicians can be also, and what I've seen is that people who've taken up an instrument, in my own family, I have people whose profession is music, but even for the people where it's at not such a professional level, it means that when they move, they can pick up with a new orchestra or play with a new band or join a new, ukulele group or something, or choir, and all these things cut right across all of these other demographic boundaries. And I think it's just so important. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Councillor Tom.
I'd briefly like to also voice my thanks. I think this is a fantastic project, and I really share the sentiment that music can be such an empowering thing. It's really important that we don't underestimate how essential art is, because there's a habit of treating it like it's some sort of luxury when it is such an essential thing for so many people to have that important quality of life that they need. So once again, thank you, and I'm really looking forward to supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. To the officers involved with this, this is a fantastic project. I understand all of that. Finding out about it and reading about it from the paper was hard work. We could have done with a bit more information about the hub to us that are new to the thing. Sounds like it's idyllic. The examples, I'm sounding like a Grinch today. This is not me. I don't want to be the Grinch, right? But I'm just saying here is, you're educating you're educating members to make decisions that impact people. We need to understand more about the hub. I had to go looking and hunting for it. There was no links, no added value, just a list of examples. And to go to the nth degree, which I know isn't the case, if there's one pupil per example in that, then that's not value for money. If it's multiple pupils, then it could be. And that's what we've got to look at from here. So I would implore you that, I totally support the project. I totally support the aims of the paper. I would implore on the officers involved in such papers to give members more information and more links to information about this. From what we heard from the gentleman, sounds like I would really like to know more. But I had to really hunt and go and try and find it. And in many cases, I found that quite difficult. So hopefully that feedback is well received.
I think it's really helpful. Thank you, Councillor Goldsack, because I think because of the scope of the reach, and the fact that there's 23,000 children that benefit, what we aimed to do is give a flavour in 3.3 of all the different projects. But you're right, we could give much more detail in terms of the outputs and the outcomes that it makes for those children and young people. So we're happy to take that on board, and we can share further information going forward.
If I may, I don't want you to put all of that information in the paper, but if you could provide links to it so that we could go away and accurately find it, read about it, see some examples. I bet there's some great videos that are available. I'm sure there's some YouTube commenters. See what I mean? If you sit there and do that research, it's all there, and that gives us a much more flavoured and educated position to come to this table to make decisions on financial matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Young and then Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to endorse all the comments about how great this programme is, but I've got a sort of, taking a step back, a bit more of a fundamental question of why it's structured this way. Why do we have the hub? Why aren't we, for example, just having the Department of Education give us the money and we give the money to the schools? So just as a point of information.
I think you'd have to direct that to the Department of Education, I'm afraid. That's the setup they have created. It's a lot different to how it was 20 years ago, and indeed 20 years before that. That is their current mechanism. It has pros and it has cons. We have tried very carefully, both myself and my colleague Kirsten, who covers the Peterborough area, to try and make sure that the delivery of what people expect in terms of schools and the opportunities for young people remain as unchanged as possible as these national adjustments occur. And that's always been to try and make sure the sustainability of what is effectively a longitudinal learning process over several years for young people can be supported. That's how they choose to do it at the moment. They could do it another way. Whether you'd get the consistency across a county-wide structure, notwithstanding that may change, is I'm not sure about. So if you look at the way things like county sports operate, you develop a local level of skill and talent, and then you end up working at an area level and then at a county level and so on towards the national side. And there are similarities in the same way as bringing young people together on an area basis and a county basis. If it was very fragmented, I worry that we might lose some of that coherence.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Beckett.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a couple of things. I was just wondering, as my colleague here mentions, the hub itself and the national agenda for music education. Are there specific targets or benchmarks being followed in line with the national agenda? And also, with that in mind, are the young people being involved in shaping and developing the curriculum itself so that we can continue the success outlined in the document?
Yes, is the answer to both of those. So in terms of the National Plan for Education, it's very specific about what it expects both schools and music education hubs to do. And I think one of the things we have to quite often reiterate to other parts of the education system is that schools already have a significant responsibility for a chunk of that music education plan, and our job is there to support them to try and do that. So they have access to all of that support to develop their programs further, and the advice and guidance which we have across a lot of gathered experience across the team. But there are specifics in the national plan that they are looking to achieve. I think it has already been noted at a national level that given the level of financial support available within the entire system of music education, there is a limit as to how much you can do at this time, even though the aspirations are for much more. And that's reflected at a national level. We do what we can within the framework we have in that respect. In terms of the young people's voice, we have an ongoing programme. We have had an inclusion officer before it was actually required in the national plan within the service for 4 years now. They regularly go out and they're working with young people to say, what are you looking for? What sort of opportunities are you not getting at the moment? What new areas of interest are you having? That gets reflected in. We build the development of new projects where we can through having conversations with individual young people, and of course we expect our schools to try and have those conversations as well in school at the same time. But again, we can do as much as we are able to do so.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beckett and then Mr. Young.
To help some of my fellow members, I wonder if you could add some flavour to the report and just describe briefly some of the Music Education Hub activities that help children with specific special educational needs.
Yes, of course. So the Music Education Hub invests in providers. That's how the structure works, and the providers work with a whole range of young people. So, for example, in the Cambridgeshire area, the creative arts therapy work, we have a mixture of work that is actually clinical arts therapy, so that has a medical background. That's to actually support engagement and behavioural adjustment, to actually enable them to often be in school and be engaging with others, communicating with others. A lot of my team in that field work with matters of autism, matters of adoption and bereavement, trauma aspects of that, so that there is support for young people through those journeys that they're making at the time. Similarly, we do targeted work. We did a project last year targeted at teenage young mothers, sorry, not teenage young mothers, teenagers, female teenagers at risk of harm or self-harm. And that was, again, a targeted process that we would like to do more of. It's, again, about creating sufficient funds to do repeated versions of that. The Inclusion Support Project is opening up opportunities in schools that previously weren't engaged with the service, so that they are actually now getting opportunities for their young people to either be involved in creative music making, or in some cases individual learning journeys in those schools. I could go on, and you probably haven't got time this afternoon, but there are loads of things. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this paper. I just had two questions. Firstly, it's terrific that 23,000 children have been involved in this in the last year. So clearly the reach is broad. My question was around how sustained the musical interest is of the children benefiting from this programme, and what your sense is on that front. Because on the one hand, you want to make sure as many people as possible can be involved in this, but you've got to balance that with making sure that that's a meaningful contribution towards their musical education. So do you have a sense of how many of the children are continuing with their musical journeys? And secondly, if I may, just a quick question on the age profile of the young people and children who are benefiting from this programme. Is it weighted towards primary, secondary, further education, and so on? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the progression aspects, it has been sadly a long time declining situation nationally, that you have less people working through to advanced levels. There's I get a sense at the moment that we have programs in place which are challenging that now, to actually enable more young people to go into a longer journey. You get a difference between the first year opportunity, or the first time opportunity, and then that continuation process. And that continuation process can be hampered by financial pressures for families or schools, other commitments that young people have, but they've still had that first year opportunity to say, well, okay, that's what this sort of learning journey is like. So that is beneficial, but we do want to encourage the longer sort of sustainability of learning those things. We see more coming through in our out of school provision work, which is targeted perhaps a little more towards instruments that are less commonly learnt now. Which is another thing that's changed over the last 40 years. So we do see those learning journeys, because it is wraparound musicianship and theory and ensemble playing, plus your learning studies as well. Those are leading to more developed pathways, I suppose, is the answer to that one. And I've now forgotten the second part of your question, which was the age range.
Age range.
Right. Okay, so there's been a lot of focus from the hub, national directives on Key Stage 2 upwards. So we have seen a fair amount of work between years 3 and 6, an amount that is going on with year 7 and 8. After year 8, it gets interesting, because it partly depends on what the structures are for continued curriculum learning in music in schools, and that varies. But those who are sufficiently progressed by the time they are in year 8 will tend to carry on. Those who've had the opportunity, but perhaps it's not for them, they will tend to drift off at that point. The area of interest, most interest to me, is actually reception in year 1, because I think if we could get more targeted work at the earlier stage, I think you would find that journey more successful. And certainly the levels that youngsters used to be able to reach at the primary phase are much lower now in these days, because they start much later. So we are looking at that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Did I see Councillor Whelan wanted to come in at this point? No, thank you. Are there any other questions or any debate? Can we please move to the vote, which is to approve, the proposal is to approve the extension of the consortium agreement and to delegate responsibility for extending the agreement to officers. So can I have a show of hands, please, those in support? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for coming. And Matthew, you can see there's a great deal of interest. And as a lifelong musician myself, I can wholeheartedly endorse the approach and really wish you well. And please provide, you know, a richer picture for us next time, because there's real appetite to understand more. Thank you. Thank you very much. May we move to the next item in the agenda, which is changes to the school low carbon heating programme delivery. And this will be introduced by Ethne George. Have I pronounced your name properly?
Yes.
Thank you. Head of Economy and Climate.
Thank you, Chair. So we've brought forward this paper in collaboration with colleagues in Education Capital, and it has, as obviously you see, 4 recommendations. 3 of these relate to the proposed transfer and some internal process changes to the delivery of this ongoing programme. And the 4th one at recommendation D is seeking approval for 3 particular projects that were public sector decarbonisation scheme funding has been awarded that would go ahead in the summer holidays next year, and where committee approval is required for due to the sums involved in those projects. So as the paper sets out, what we've explained is obviously this programme has been very heavily involved in, you know, a key part of the funding has come from public sector decarbonisation scheme funding historically. And actually the way we've been operating it has worked, but it has actually added additional administrative burdens as it's not perfectly aligned. Obviously, our framework expired earlier in the year, and in the lead up to that, we did a comprehensive review involving colleagues from around the council to really look at how this programme was being delivered and whether it was best to continue with us, or whether the construction element of it and the management of contracts would be better placed with Education Capital, which is what we're recommending here. This is partly because of the nature of what those colleagues are currently undertaking with their maintenance programme. We obviously work very closely with those colleagues in the delivery of it, but there are other changes too we're suggesting, which are around the sort of the role of the schools in entering into contracts with contractors. These projects have grown in size over time. Some of them are very significant, and we feel that, you know, we're providing a lot of support to the schools. And actually, again, this end of the framework actually gives us an opportunity to review all of those, the way that we're delivering the programme as a council, and to optimise it. So to date, we haven't actually experienced any problems. What we've had is significant additional time from officers just because of that not ideally aligned process. And this is an opportunity for us to regulate that and sort of improve on that. So there was a very comprehensive review undertaken, and it's effectively going to make us more efficient internally. And what we will continue to do as a team is to provide the sort of specialist support at the front end during and after the process as needed, because obviously we're working in a wider range of activities linked to government funding around climate and carbon and related things. So the team will still be very strongly supported, but it's the movement of that capital management responsibility as set out in the paper. And in relation to the final recommendation, those are the 3 particular schools as set out where we require the decision in order for that to progress due to the financial limits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. So having previously sat on the Environment and Green Investment Committee, I'm aware these sorts of decisions or recommendations used to come to Environment and Green Investment, did they not? And a number of schools did have their heating decarbonised through the installation of air source heat pumps and so on. What I'm slightly concerned about is that, as far as I'm aware, the Children and Young People's Committee or the Children and Young People's Directorate is hard pressed financially, and I just wanted to understand whether there's a risk that if this work is shifted to the Children and Young People's Committee or Children and Young People's Department, or decisions are made here rather than at ENGI, is there any risk that these things won't be delivered through lack of funding?
So we've discussed that with colleagues, and certainly from all the discussions, we feel that's not a risk, because we will continue to support the sort of upfront seeking the funding. There is a budget there you'll see agreed going forward, obviously, so it's subject to that type of budget being in place into the future, which I think would be an issue whichever committee was deciding it in the future. But as it currently stands with budget allocations, then there would be no change to the programme or the ambition of the programme. And Education Capital colleagues very much support that decision and have taken into account that capacity factor, as I understand it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Edge.
Thank you. So in 2.5, it sets out the proposed changes will simplify the project delivery process, reduce project management burden on schools, and ensure budget is focused on those schools with boilers in most urgent need of replacement. If I may, I'm sure other members also know of schools in their division that were a little bit dismayed with the previous framework. The application progress was a burden for many of them, and certainly in one case I'm aware of, they've had to subsequently make a decision to replace their existing boilers with 2 new standard boilers. For schools like these, they'll probably have made those decisions to make sure that they're warm this winter. For them, on reflection, although they're supportive of the low carbon solutions, they'll probably be content with what's actually happened with them. This one particular school I'm conscious of was very concerned about the ongoing costs of the low carbon solution. So this leads me to a couple of questions, if I may. How are we going to re-engage schools that were frustrated by the earlier iteration? And it's great that these programmes come with funding to support delivery of the low carbon heating, but do we have clarity on the ongoing costs for schools and whether this is sustainable for them?
Thank you. So yes, in terms of the ongoing costs, each school is assessed as sort of a business case is put together, and it has to meet certain tolerances.
Could I just ask that you bring the microphone just a little bit nearer, because we're slightly missing the crucial stuff that you're saying. Sorry to interrupt the flow, but I think it's really important we hear what you have to say.
No, thank you for flagging that. Sorry, I hadn't realised. So in terms of the ongoing costs, a business case is put together for each school. And only if it passes ensures that they will either be better off or at least cost neutral. And that business case is explained to the school, and it's part of the process to whether they want to go ahead or not. Part of making that happen, because obviously heat pumps are more costly than replacing your existing gas boiler in the case of a school with gas, in particular. The solar components and sometimes the LED components of the scheme are quite critical because they help balance and offset it over time. So that is looked at each one. We do also provide some ongoing support to schools to help with troubleshooting once they're out of the snagging period. So they're helped with the 12-month defect period from installation. And after that, we do try and make sure we pick up, obviously the schools are responsible for those systems at that point, but where we see issues with BEM, so the building energy management systems, the school's not necessarily able to monitor effectively. We do flag that and try and support them as we can. And we do also have a programme where we're looking at schools. We have worked with the schools who have been disappointed where projects haven't gone ahead to look at what else we can do for them in terms of helping them with so we're working with community energy groups to potentially put solar PV and do LED lighting in the schools. And again, we keep very close working with Education Capital colleagues on that list, and we're doing a really sort of detailed assessment of that whole pipeline and what will need to happen. So they have missed it currently, but we do look at when we could bring them back into a process, and that work will continue. So we really don't want to leave any school behind, but obviously sometimes there are hiccups or issues that arise close to contractual time, and it's a lot of different components that have to come together to make, as you see from the list of funding, for example, that has to come together to make a project go through, and the vast majority have gone through.
Sorry, if I may, can I just come back on the point about the sustainable costs for those schools? So beyond delivery, when it's up and running, are we confident that the program that's being delivered with a low low carbon heating system over time is affordable and sustainable for those for schools?
Well, we don't have a crystal ball in terms of energy prices and how that's going to affect them, but modelling is done to try to take account of that. As I say, it does come down to the regular servicing and maintenance and operation, and the school understanding what is probably in some cases a more complex system than the one they're used to operating. So whilst we can't hold their hand through every single issue, we do look out for the bigger issues and we do try to help them rectify those where we can. What we do find is that because school budgets are pressed, sometimes not all the servicing and regular annual checks that are happening perhaps are always happening. So that does. So it's, there's a sort of, I suppose, a rounded picture there in terms of the realities of it. But yes, we are working hard to try to make sure those benefits are realised.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. I wonder if I can get a little bit more information, please, on the difference between the PSDS SALIX approach and our own EPS approach. Project and programme management within the council has been a hot topic of my conversation for a number of years. I'm just a bit concerned by what I read in 3.2 and more so probably in 3.3. It's a fundamental change to the way of business operating from what we've done to date. So I wonder if you could explain. I guess really I'm looking for your level of confidence that we've got this covered and it's not going to be a hurdle for us, because we have examples in the past of siloed project and programme management which doesn't come together. And what we're talking about here is still, even though we're transferring across to CYP, it's still an environmental-led project, and I'm just a bit worried about it.
With transfers, obviously there are always risks. However, the two teams have been working really closely together. So historically, our team was involved in a number of big capital projects, and currently it's only the schools programmes that remain with us. Certainly Education Capital colleagues are routinely delivering projects of this sort of scale and have all the information to hand about the age of the boilers and the servicing and issues that we need to access. So we see the relationship that we've built up over the course of this project as one way that any risks in the sort of the transfer and the change of responsibility should be minimised. So we do think that this does offer really good opportunities to make sure that some of the things that were suboptimal around the schools entering into contracts with contractors, but being kind of one step removed, not really having the capacity, that will be improved by CYP. Obviously, we've been doing that role and it's been working, but nonetheless, we've got every confidence that Education Capital colleagues, because they are operating those kind of, large scale projects, and they always have recourse to us. And as we've said, we're going to maintain the skills in terms of seeking the grant funding and also at the other end when projects go into, have been commissioned to help them with ongoing monitoring and improvements. So we think that will be a positive and certainly nothing particularly at risk as a result of that.
That's reassuring to hear. But as an example, getting down into detail, you said yourself that most of this work is retrofit during the 6 weeks holidays or the summer holidays, which by itself defines a very finite period for the work to be done. So when we're dealing with contractors, there's plenty of evidence where in behalf we've shared or even carried that risk, when actually I believe it should be a financial risk on the contractors involved who take out the work in the first place. So again, I'm just seeking a bit of reassurance that our procurement in that area, knowing the windows in which we've got to work and the impact on the schools involved, is as tight as we'd like it to be.
Certainly recently we advised a number of schools not to proceed because of certain risks that were perceived that were brought in from the contractors at the last moment. I think we were operating under a design and build contract, and the idea was that, in theory that would be better because then if there's a design problem, the company that constructs couldn't then claim that it wasn't their fault to do with the design. But as we've seen from CYP in the way they're managing it and their style of contracting, which does separate design and build, has actually been very successful, and they've had really productive installations that haven't had the same issues. So we have confidence this will actually work better than what we've been operating. And this is the strategic point at which we have that chance to sort of review it and make that sort of new decision, new approach. Does that sufficiently reassure you, or
are you sufficiently reassured, Councillor Goldsack? Thank you. If no one else has a question, I just have a small point. Oh, Councillor Sidlow.
Chair, off the back of what Councillor Edge asked, you said that you offset the costs of the pumps against changing to solar and LED.
Not changing, it's part of usually a package of of different technology that goes into the school.
The way it was worded sounded like that the pumps are more expensive to run, and that without changing to solar and LED, you don't manage to prove through your modelling that it's cheaper. Oh, sorry. Need to learn to project.
Did hear that, so shall I answer the question, or so I'll try and repeat the question. So in terms of each project is different, and the financial modelling in order to ensure a school it'll either be cost neutral or beneficial, like positive to the school. They will pay less over time. It might be a heat pump, it might be a heat pump with solar. Most likely it will be a heat pump with solar, and that's a whole project, if you see what I mean. Now, heat pumps currently are still not wide scale, so sometimes it does effectively, there's no question that it does cost more up front to install them than replacing a gas boiler or a oil heater at the end of its life. However, over the lifetime of that equipment, the school will not be paying any more than it would do if it maintained its fossil fuel based system, and that's one of the gateways to be able to join the scheme. Otherwise they don't participate. So it is designed to be cost neutral or cost beneficial to schools.
That's fine, but the costs of electricity are increasing. I'm also curious, are the schools, do they have to buy their electricity from renewable only sources? In which case the electricity they're getting to run these heat pumps is likely generated through gas, which we're currently shipping from the United States at a great cost because we're not drilling for our own. So until electricity prices come down, I don't think this is a sustainable project.
So just to clarify, so the schools can choose their own energy provider, electricity, supplier, and they will be getting a fair amount of their electricity from the grid through that supplier. The solar panels, which effectively are part grant funded and go onto them, then remove their, reduce their reliance on that electricity from the grid, so it reduces their cost. The gas currently in the UK, according to the latest statistics from the government in the Duke's report, gas is largely coming from Norway. It's oil that's coming from America, and we are very gas dependent, absolutely. These projects are aimed at reducing our dependence on gas and obviously increasing our energy security. Electricity prices do fluctuate, but the financial modelling takes some level of price variation over time and includes inflation and things like that. Obviously, we've seen a very unusual spike in recent years because of the Ukraine war that we haven't seen since the 1970s in terms of those sorts of price spikes. But having this sort of technology, there will be things in future to do with flexibility of loads and potentially battery storage that the schools will be able to access and actually make cost savings potentially against, which is an area we're looking into for the future. So as I say, projects don't go ahead unless they are over the project lifetime. The school is,
Oh, another microphone failure, I'm afraid. Just the last bit, but we got the point of that. Oh, while that's being sorted, was that the final point you wanted to make on that? Yes. So while that is while your microphone's being sorted, we have another question from Councillor Tong.
Apologies for waiting to the end. I've noticed Councillor Sidlow has a habit of speaking at the very end, so it can be quite difficult to respond to the points made unless I also wait until the last minute and then respond in turn. So firstly, I just want to compliment this project. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. I think this is the type of project that's both beneficial for the planet, which all people are going to share in, including young people, but also the obvious help it's going to offer to schools that are supporting young people is just so major. And the cost saved is just going to help us do even more to protect young people and make sure they're getting the level of education we deserve. I once more want to point out, and I referenced this earlier and I was somewhat restrained, a lot of councillors in this room got involved with the council because they wanted to represent their constituents and vulnerable people in their communities. But we have seen Reform come along, a party that is actively in the pocket of oil and gas lobbyists that are putting...
Excuse me, Councillor Tong, could we, this is an opportunity to ask the officer about the report, and I think we do really need to stick to that. Thank you.
If you want, that's okay. I think it's an important potential conflict of interest to mention, but that's completely fine.
Could I possibly just make one point in terms of the savings, which I should have made earlier? So this is part of a larger programme of decarbonisation work that's been going on since 2014 in the council. And I should point out that so far the programme has saved collectively the schools that have participated, not all of whom have had heat pumps, but some of which have, as we list in the paper. We estimate are just coming up to £1 million so far in terms of energy bill savings. And that will be a much higher figure, probably at least 8 times that by the end of the life of these projects. So obviously those are estimates. We don't monitor the bills of the schools directly because they're their bills, but those are estimates based on the information available to us.
Thank you very much. I've got a quick question. 3.12, this is about, it's just a mechanism. We spend the money and then we recover via a grant. Is there a cash flow risk? Because several years ago, one might have assumed that there would be no cash flow risk associated with that. Have assumptions changed? Can you provide any reassurance to this committee?
So certainly it hasn't been a cash flow issue. You are right that we shouldn't make that assumption that it never would be. Generally, as the paper flags, generally the lag is not substantial, and it's the one that we would keep a very close eye on is the end of the financial year one, which with PSDS can potentially be an issue because all their project deadlines and funding deadlines align with the financial year end. So I think that is certainly something that has been managed historically and can continue to be managed and shouldn't be a concern.
Thank you very much. A final question from Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick comment, really, not a question. I mean, I think this is a great demonstration of how green projects are almost always inevitably tied up with cost savings. I really support it. I think it's great. And what I also like is the officers' very practical attention to, does it really save money? Really investigating each case. And so this is not some airy-fairy green nonsense. It's really practical, saving schools money, and it's sustainable. You know, sunlight is free, it doesn't damage the earth. And I think it's a great programme, and I commend officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. May we please move to the vote if everyone has asked the questions that they would like to ask. We're being asked to vote on the 4 recommendations in the report. And can I ask, please, those in favour to raise their hands? That is not quite unanimous. So those against? Thank you. And no abstentions. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much, Ethne. Sorry, you ran through quite a few microphones in that session, but hopefully this one will last the next session as well. So next we have the Children's Complaints and Feedback Team's report on service improvement and performance in the last year. Can I please ask Liz Clark, thank you very much, to introduce the report and take questions. Thank you. Let you settle down and hopefully switch on the microphone.
Okay, is that all right? Okay, brilliant. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name's Liz Clark. I am the Service Director for Quality Assurance and Practice Improvement for Children, Education and Families within the Council. And I am presenting to you today the report that's in the pack, which is the annual report from the Children's Complaint and Feedback Team for April 24 to March 25. I think that's in pages 55 to 84 of your pack. So I'm very conscious for obviously a number of colleagues and elected representatives here today. There's quite a lot of information in this report because obviously it's not only understanding how the complaints process kind of works in the local authority, particularly within children's. Then there's also the whole set of things around the responsibilities, kind of why we're set up to do it like this. Then obviously data, kind of information and case studies. So I kind of recognise there's quite a lot to absorb. And I would like to make the opportunity to say that whilst it's not perhaps as explicit, it is in the introduction of the actual report. But obviously this piece of work links to wider work of the local authority and the council in terms of its customer experience programme, in terms of how we kind of sort of our customer handling policy and the way that we kind of respond and work with our communities. It is in a format, the report, I think it's important to say that the way it's been presented today is in a format that was developed over time with kind of previous elected members. Absolutely fine, obviously, to hear today, perhaps some feedback on content and kind of structure. If obviously for yourselves as you know, newer to the roles in the local authority in this aspect, it would be helpful to hear. So the team for Children's Complaints and Feedback sits within Quality Assurance and Practice Improvement. And obviously, as you would anticipate, all the information in here and the way that we work in response to complaints and feedback is part of our continuous improvement kind of loop. All the findings, you know, in terms of thematically and in terms of the analysis of them, linked to kind of other development pieces of work and improvement work, as you would expect. And whilst it's really important to look at how we've responded to individual complainants, individual complaints, and dealt with those individuals with compassion and dignity and humanity and listened to them, it is also then about how we bring together the themes and information and use those to inform policies, practice, strategies across kind of SEF. So I would like to make that point, you know, and in terms of what we hear from complaints and feedback, it is about how we hold ourselves to account as officers for the community and the people we serve. So the overview report, I'm not proposing, I'm sure you'll be grateful to go through all of it, kind of line by line. I would like to kind of relate to the fact that the overview piece that came with you, the front report, does give you the information about the requirements about how we are to address and respond to kind of complaints. There is quite an important bit around that the statutory requirement is around reporting publicly and to elected members with regard to statutory complaints. We choose as a local authority to include complaints related to SEND because we feel that's incredibly important and transparent, but actually the legislative and statutory requirement, you know, doesn't do that. So it is important to say actually we are looking at that and interrogating and holding ourselves to account on a wider base in this council than perhaps we are required to. There is information about how the team is set up and how it delivers kind of things. Obviously, I'm happy to kind of answer any kind of specific kind of questions around that construct. It is important to kind of make a reference to, we do at all points across SEF look to have an early resolution involvement with anyone who is concerned or unhappy about the service that they receive. That does not mean that you dissuade people from making complaints. It's really important that people are given the information about their right to raise concerns and complaints, but you would expect us, and it is best practice, that we are helping to try and resolve things at an earlier stage than people having to go through a formal process, which then may feel quite alienating, may feel that they're just having to go through kind of hoops, when we want to keep that kind of relational stuff from the start. So in terms of the annual report, obviously there is sort of information, there's at a glance pages in terms of our data and statistics, and we clearly can see in terms of the numbers of kind of stage 1 and our increase in kind of some aspects of complaints kind of over the past year. I would like to make reference particularly, as I am very mindful that the numbers of complaints in relation to SEND, you know, has kind of considerably increased kind of in terms of this report. And again, there are some very key things that the report kind of refers to. It makes reference in the introduction and the forward by Martin Purbrook as the director around our SEND inspection. And actually our area SEND inspection did confirm what we knew about our EHCP, our education healthcare plan work, and the work that we had to do and the challenges that we had set ourselves. And actually the information and feedback around complaints is part of that triangulation of info and information. So we do understand that. I would like to kind of make reference to the fact that page 2 of the report does at the bottom of the page again make reference to the fact that we are not unique in Cambridgeshire to seeing that kind of increase in complaints around kind of SEND. It is a national issue, and there's been national reflection on why that may be the case in terms of the SEND system and the experience of children and families kind of within it. We also can see in the report that we have seen quite a large increase in terms of percentage in inquiries with regard to the local government ombudsman. That is around inquiries, not necessarily all of those are investigated by the local government ombudsman. And I would wish to draw attention, which is also in the report, that whilst we are not in any way complacent about anything that goes to that stage, because if it goes to the local government ombudsman, if individuals wish to seek kind of sort of redress from there, then they have already gone through our complaints process for the council through stages 1 to 3. So but what we are seeing in our letter from the LGO of May 25, that our compliance as SEF as a Children Education and Families Directorate with remedies is now at 100%. And that in terms of the 23 children and education families inquiries that the LGO investigated, they upheld 78%, but that is in comparison with 89% of similar authorities. So whilst it is not, I am not suggesting it is okay that we had 78% upheld. When we compare ourselves to other similar local authorities, you know, we do see that we have that slightly kind of lower level, and also that of 6 of the 18 upheld, we had provided a satisfactory remedy before it reached the Ombudsman. And again, those are in difficult circumstances, because I think I have to keep saying we are not happy that anyone has felt they have had to approach the local authority, the local government Ombudsman. But actually, we then need to look at our performance and those findings kind of within that. On a national level, at national meetings with regard to that, in terms of looking at kind of sort of what local authorities are doing with regard to ECNAS, which is the assessment that precedes an education healthcare plan. There has been a national reflection, and it has been cited for Cambridgeshire as well, that actually the issues around that are coming out of some of our complaints are not due to maladministration of the council or within those of us kind of within the council working with those families and children, but are around resource related service issues. And again, that does not make it okay, but it is important to cite to this committee that this council, that this directorate has not been found to be maladministrative, but that recognition around kind of the ability to kind of respond to everybody in the timely fashion. I am conscious that I'm talking quite a lot, only because I think there is so much in the report, and I do appreciate for many of you it is coming to this, you know, and this process at a first time. So it's trying to kind of perhaps preempt maybe some of the things that you would wish to ask. I'm sure I haven't. I'm sure there's lots of questions to have. It's also important to point out when you look at the compliments that actually the highest number of compliments also were in relation to SEND, including the statutory assessment team within the local authority. So whilst it is an increasing number of complaints, it also holds the highest number of compliments, and there is information in the report detailing those compliments. I think it's really helpful that we've got case studies within there. I hope people find that that brings that, you know, gives some brings it to life. I know that's an overused phrase, but I think those are really helpful. Also, of course, just to reiterate that the most common themes of upheld and partially upheld complaints are around delays in communication, and delays are factual. So when we look at why there is there's an upheld 83% of our SEND services stage 1 complaints that were concluded in the year were found to be fully or partially upheld. I would wish to draw your attention to those often those are factual complaints. Did you provide the report in time? Did you complete the assessment in time? And the complaint being that it wasn't. So actually to find that they are fully or partially upheld would be expected. And I would wish to kind of make that observation. So there is also a section in the report around improvements during the year. Again, I think it's quite important to say that these are not finished kind of pieces of work, but it is wishing to draw attention to what I said at the start, which is how the information about how individuals experience and thematic analysis of the work that we do can feed into kind of show the you said we did, you know, where does the loop from our complaints and feedback go in terms of our practice. I'm conscious, apologies Chair, I've been talking for a while, so I will stop now.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Liz, and taking us through what is a really, important report. I mean, we are today not voting on it as such. We are reviewing and scrutinising it, but it contains really valuable information, and it is always an opportunity when we look at complaints to consider improvements. And it's a really difficult situation we find ourselves in. So, but it doesn't mean we can't consider improvements. So thank you very much for that report. Who has questions or comments? Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Liz. I'm looking at page 15 of the report, page 76 of the pack, and there's graph 7. You got it? Yep. I'm trying to do this from a position of understanding, and I'm questioning my own understanding. But you know, what it looks to me is if we're pushing 500 open complaints on 7,886 EHCPs that are in place. Am I reading that correct?
Sorry, it's 7,886.
7,886 open EHCPs, but we've got 488 open
Stage
complaints.
Complaints that have been made at stage 1 within that period. So they're not open, but they are the stage 1 data for the year.
Okay, so they're not open complaints. They have complaints that have been made, and it may include open ones, but we haven't got that information.
No, I mean there is detail in the report about how many complaints were dealt with at stage 1 during the year. How many were? Sorry, I mean I apologise. I would have to sort of.
No, don't apologise. I wasn't looking for an apology. I'm looking for understanding. This is the questions to officers bit. But I think the thing that jumps out to me, this is where I want to go on to, that in the 7-year period we've shown, we've more than doubled the amount of open EHCPs, but there's an exponential leap in number of open complaints. Can you comment on that, please? Have I made that clear?
Yeah, I think I'll pick that up if that's okay, Councillor Gilsat. So I think what we're illustrating within the report, as you've identified, is that over that period, we've seen over 100% increase in the numbers of education, health and care plans. And similarly, we've seen a growth in the numbers of complaints relating to those education, health and care plans. And I think what Liz set out in the introduction to the report was that predominantly the complaints are around our timeliness of issuing plans, because obviously there's a statutory requirement that from the point of the request for a plan to the issuing of that plan, that should be conducted within 20 weeks. So we are recognising that there has been a surge in complaints, but we're also recognising alongside that surge in complaints that there's also been an increase in the numbers of education, health and care plans.
I think what I'm about to say is I'm saying it in the hope that it helps you in terms of future funding and future resource need. Because just to take one stage further what you said, I would agree with you that you're looking at about 100%, probably just a little over 100% increase in EHCPs, but you're looking at over a 500% increase in complaints. That's not proportionate to the number of EHCPs that are coming through. That's disproportionate, and that worries me. Furthermore, it worries me in as much as we had a lady here today asking questions about this exact same thing. The lady's been here more than once to ask questions. I'm aware of other incidences that are going on. You know, it seems fairly obvious to me that we have an area of ongoing concern around this. I'm not sure this report tells us everything that needs to be done to address it for the members. For the for the electorate, basically, and particularly for those that are in the EHCP world.
Pressing buttons. I'll just come back. I think Sarah may have an observation as well. I think your final point, I think Sarah will kind of pick up in terms of some other information kind of coming to members in terms of relation to SEND specifically. As you picked up, this is a report about complaints and feedback, not a full report around the kind of work of kind of SEND and SAT within the council. I was only going to make an observation around when we see an increase in complaints, and this isn't particular to thinking about SEND, but generally, I have always, I've spent 25 years continuous local government service, and I've always been in different local authorities that actually if you have complaints, that means that you are enabling people to have a voice. And sometimes an increase in complaints is really helpful because it means that people do feel able to talk about the service they're getting. And actually we have more information about the experience of individuals in terms of how we work. And that's not meant to be a flippant answer, Councillor Goldsack. That's meant to say, I think that sits within some of this as well, including, as Sarah already answered, about some of the challenges nationally and locally about timeliness.
I recognise it might not be, and I certainly don't take that as a flippant answer. So don't feel abashed about that in any way. What would be very useful for me as a member, and I'm sure, hopefully, I'll speak for other members as well, is of the 488 complaints made into 2025, how many are open? How many as a proportion are we dealing with and have dealt with satisfactory to the EHCP complainees' satisfaction? That's kind of where I'm. This report is very good and it tells us an awful lot of information, but I think, as you highlighted, Liz, this doesn't tell us everything. It's not designed to tell us everything, so therefore there are gaps in our knowledge, really, and our visibility. And I think that's probably where I started from. You know, am I questioning my own understanding of this, or am I questioning what I'm reading in front of me?
Could I come back on that point? Because I think what Liz made reference to a report that's coming to committee in October. So I think what this report does is set out the complaints, where they sit, and the growth in those complaints and the themes within those complaints. It's for the services then to obviously respond to the issues and the recurrent themes within those complaints. So we've got a report scheduled for this committee in October. And within that report, we will go into more depth about, you know, so what are we doing to improve the service offer to children, young people and families that are recurrently reflected within these complaints. But briefly, we can obviously, we accept that, you know, the position currently is not where we would like to be. And I think you've clearly identified there is a mismatch currently in terms of the level of referrals and the capacity to meet those referrals within those timescales. So what we've done in response to that is we've requested support to put in additional capacity to manage that increase so that we can better respond to in a more timely manner the surge in requests that we're seeing. But we'll go into more detail in terms of how we're managing that. It does make reference to Inclusion for All, which is our framework to support improvement within the SEND area, and that was referenced within our local area inspection report in May, and it was recognised as this is the right approach. It's not fully embedded at the moment, and there's a lot more that we want to do. And regardless of the fact that perhaps in some measures we are performing better than other local authorities across the country, obviously if it's impacting on one child, one family, we want to do more. But we will be able to go into more detail in the October committee report.
One last comment on that, and good, and I look forward to the October report. But when somebody goes out to a fire, the first thing they do is put the fire out, and then they work out how the fire started and try and stop it starting again. I'm look forward to the October report, but I'm a little bit nervous that we're trying to put out something that's going to smoulder forever, and we're never going to get a point to understanding how it started in the first place. That's my imbalance. It worries me a little bit. But let's wait for the October report, and we'll see where we go from there. But thank you for your answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Lowe, then Councillor Beckett.
Thank you. I know I see in the report that you've obviously had service improvements throughout the year. My concern is, are you now at the staffing level that is needed to support all these children and young people? Because obviously, if somebody's off long-term sick due to stress for the amount of work they've got on, there's always that knock-on effect. And I think it's, if we can make sure that we have the right systems in place that can help and support the people doing the necessary work, I think this will, in the end, help the running of the service as well.
Can I just clarify? Obviously, the report covers a wide piece of work across children's. When you talk about the improvements, do you mean improvements across children, education and families, or in relation to the discussion we've just had about the specifics of SEND?
Both, really, if that's at all possible.
No, it's fine. Do you want to do send on? Yeah.
We're both keen to respond. Yeah, and I would just wanted to point out that in terms of putting out fires, we've very successfully managed a fire recently at Fendrayton Primary School. So I'm just wanted to highlight that because it's a really positive news story and it relates to our temporary buildings that in a previous report as well. But I take on board the point. Yes, in terms of the workforce, I think one of the helpful things about this annual report is that it helps inform a number of parallel strategies, basically. So Inclusion for All is our framework in terms of improving our practice. And one strand within that is inclusive people. And that's where we're looking at a number of things to improve the stability within the workforce. So there's obviously issues in terms of training. So where there's themes that recurrently come through in our complaints, we look at the training that we need to put in place with our teams. But we also need to look at the balance across the workforce between our permanent staff and our agency staff, because and one of our objectives is obviously to have that pathway to permanence, because the more staff that we have working with us permanently, the more consistent that offer is to children, young people and families. So I think the value of the report is that it helps us then look at what do we need to do to improve the experience for children and young people. And one of the things we need to do is obviously look at our workforce, look at the capacity. So I think there's a really helpful diagram on page 77 that illustrates that 20-week process that I referred to. And you can see that there's different expectations along that 20-week process. One thing that we've done is look at where are the pressures within that process. And we know that one of the pressures in that process is the assessments. So when we say yes to assess, then the timeliness of conducting those assessments is dependent on the capacity that we have within the Education Psychology Service. So one of the things that we've done in terms of that inclusive people work strand is look at, have we got sufficient educational psychologists, and how are we going to ensure that we put the capacity in the places that are most pressurized within that 20-week timeline. And that's one of the things that we will be able to focus more on in the October committee report. So there's a number of key strands, I think, that this report helps us to shape our response in terms of improvement across the service, and workforce is one of them.
And I think just to add to that, particularly around, I talked about how we kind of analyse kind of themes and patterns. If we look at the complaints that are not specifically related to kind of SEND and the statutory assessment team, when we look more at our targeted support and our children's social care ones, a lot more of those fall under kind of things around communication and expectations. I think, it is a fraught process quite often for families and children to be involved with children's services, particularly at a level around child in need, child protection, or children in care, and getting it right and making families feel and children feel well communicated with and understood. I don't think we always achieve that, and that's obviously what some of those complaints kind of come down to. So when I talked at the start around, obviously I sit within quality assurance and practice improvement. So all of this feeds into what are the kind of training needs or gaps, or thinking about generalizing the kind of skill set. So you learn from the individual complaints about saying, this is how this played out for somebody. What, obviously responding to the individual, but actually what does that mean we need to think about as a team, as a service area, as a group of kind of services within children's. So whilst again going back to, you don't want anyone to have a difficult or unhappy experience kind of in working with children's, but we do, I think it's the bit around the so what. We talk about that all the time in quality assurance. So what? So what does that mean? It's got to mean something. It's got to make a difference. And I think, we are really, in terms of kind of, the workforce and supporting the workforce to equip them, but also making sure that we are a front-facing workforce with our communities who feel that, they get the service that they'd hope for. But as I said, sometimes these are difficult aspects of work. These are difficult conversations. And we're learning, people's experiences of those sometimes.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Beckett, then Councillor Young.
Thank you. Yes, I'm also glad that we actually have feedback and complaints that can inform us where services might not be satisfactory. It's obviously a really good mechanism to sort of improve services. However, while we can see a lot about the amount of complaints and the general themes, has there actually been more of an attempt to break down the nearly 800 complaints and categorize them to allow like a more detailed view as to where the problems areas are and what the opportunities are to improve them?
I think a lot of us do this. The short answer is yes. We do have a really detailed, as you might expect, a tracker about every single complaint and the findings and recommendations, the actions to be taken, the findings. Then you can obviously, then we look to filter to kind of understand particular kind of areas, particular themes, what the actions are. So I think in terms of what sits behind this report, and then we have various kind of quality and practice kind of boards and meetings where we use that. We've got a participation strategic group, we've got a practice quality governance board, we've got a performance monitoring group, things that you would absolutely expect that we've got in place that sit within and work across our performance framework and our quality assurance framework. So just to provide that assurance, I don't have it in front of me, but if I was inclined to kind of sort of go away and scrutinise that today, I can find that in terms of its themes and patterns and detail.
I mentioned it because I'm building on what Councillor Goldsack said, really, is that it seems like an annual report for complaints and feedback would be the place to put more of that information so that members of this committee can actually scrutinise that and understand which departments or which aspects of SEND provisions are being seeing increases in complaints. At the moment, it's difficult to sort of see beyond the headlines.
That's a fair observation. I think, as I said in my quite lengthy preamble and presentation of the report, if there are things that we need to think about that would be helpful for, for forward reporting, then absolutely we can take that on board. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Young, then Councillor Bradnam.
I think what I was going to say has already been said by lots of other people. I just say I commend the availability of these statistics. I note that you have stated something of what you have done to respond to all of them, which I think is great, and that more details coming in October. So I'm not going to say any more. Thanks.
Thank you. Admirably brief. Thank you very much. Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. And thank you for the report, Liz and Sarah. I'm looking at the diagram that you referred to on page 77, which is the assessment timeline. And given that, holding in our heads that the majority of complaints lay around communication and delay. And so there's an element there that perhaps people don't realise how long this process takes in the first place. And I wondered what we're doing to make sure that parents and guardians do understand that it is quite a long process anyway. But also on your diagram, if we just look at the cloud in the middle, weeks 6 to 12, that's a whole term where somebody might be waiting for an assessment and their child might not be in school. And so I was sort of hoping, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to confirm this is what happens, to see some arms on this footpath saying, keeping in touch with the parent and telling them where we've got to, because that is a long time to wait if you haven't got anything coming back to you. and as I say, I'm hoping that you're going to say, yes, of course, Councillor Braddon, we contact people every couple of weeks or whatever. So can you just confirm how you keep in touch with parents during that assessment process so they know how far they are along it? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I need to probably make clear that that timeline that's plotted that you're referring to on page 16, that's the statutory timeline. So that's what we have to operate within. But I accept your points in terms of obviously parents and carers are keen to get an outcome as soon as possible. And we do, and obviously one of the key issues that's recurrent in our complaints is the communication. We're doing a lot to improve that communication. Caseworkers have allocated cases, but I don't want to misrepresent the scale of the issues in that we aim, obviously, in terms of the way we communicate. I think, as Liz said, obviously it's really critical that we're empathetic and courteous in all of our communication. I think it's fair to say that there's still a long way to go in terms of sustaining that communication and improving the quality of that communication. And that's not necessarily down to the team or the caseworkers. It probably relates more to the capacity issues that we're aiming to address through that additional funding that I referred to earlier. So I think it's something that we're aware of. It's something that we return to in our training. I meet every 6 weeks with the entire SEND team. And we've recently appointed Michael Bateman as the Assistant Director, who joined us with 23 years experience in May. And Michael will come to present that report in October. So I think a lot is improving, but I wouldn't like to suggest that we're there yet. I think there's a lot more that we need to do. We meet regularly with our Parent Carer Forum. I meet regularly with the chair. I meet weekly with the chair of Parent Carer Forum. But not all parents, and this came up in our inspection, not all parents and carers use the Parent Carer Forum. So we're also looking at how do we ensure that we're hearing from those seldom heard parents, so we know there's more to do, and we're doing everything that we can to improve the timeliness of our communication and the quality of our communication. But I think that additional capacity obviously will add, some momentum to the actions that we're already progressing in that way.
And that was the other thing I was going to ask, and others have asked, is have you got the capacity to deliver this in a because it takes a long time to ring people up, especially when they're not there. So, you're indicating that there is additional funding for additional capacity. So I'm just hoping that you feel that will enable you to deliver and deliver within the 20 weeks.
Yeah, I think it will definitely help, but I also think it comes back to the training and also our workforce plan that I referred to earlier in terms of, there's a national crisis in SEND. We know from the report that the local area inspection in May that the approach we're adopting is the right approach. It's not fully embedded, and there's significant things that we still need to do. But I think it's really important that we motivate our staff, because that's going to help us retain those staff and move some of the dependency on agency staff to permanency. So I think we recognise the areas for improvement, but we also recognise that we've got and it came out within the report, we have got people working really hard who really care and want to do a good job. So I think whilst accepting we're way off where we want to be, we also want to, and I think it's really important that the report includes compliments as well. And as Liz said, SEND is also the area that gets the most compliments. We make a point of ensuring that those compliments go back to our staff. And whenever I visit a primary school, I ask them about their caseworker and the experience of that caseworker, and I make a point of sharing that with the staff, because I think that's also an important way of ensuring that we do continue to improve and also retain the staff that we have and attract new staff and agency staff to become permanent.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have reached 4 o'clock. With your indulgence, we have 3 more people who want to ask a question. May we continue to the end of this item before we have a 10-minute break? Is that acceptable? Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Tong.
Oh, thank you very much. I did think we were about to have a break then. And good. Thank you so much for the report. I did really enjoy reading it through, and I'm looking forward to the, as mentioned numerous times, the October report. And I'm sure lots of things will be cleared up for everybody once that report is published. Just a couple of things to maybe provide some clarification. Since the publication of something called DSM-5 in 2013, there was something known as Asperger's, which was seen as a separate form of autism, and it was collapsed into one autistic spectrum, in turn meaning that the number of EHCPs essentially focused on autism have increased. And I think we have to look at some positives. The fact that the number of maintained EHCPs has gone up so drastically, the positive from that, I believe, is that our education system has become more inclusive, which is brilliant. Moving on, where it appears in 3.13, 33 of the complaints have been made directly by young people. 23 of those were supported by an advocate. And the report acknowledges that young people are engaging with the complaints process, especially with support. However, there is no detailed analysis, from my perspective, on how that feedback is shaping the services and possibly creating co-designed improvements. So possibly, that might be coming up in October, hopefully. With that in mind, maybe there's a possibility of creating a youth advisory panel for SEND and social care services. And finally, possibly looking into supporting schools and childcare services in developing a better relationship with the MPQ qualification system, so providing better strategies in developing the EHCP referrals, so that the steps and the number of weeks it takes actually speeds up, because I think sometimes possibly that is an issue in terms of the process moving forward. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're going to both answer, because some of it belongs to what pieces of work we kind of sort of lead on. So I will kind of sort of comment particularly then on the complaints received by young people. So I mentioned a participation strategic group. So obviously the voice of children specifically. So obviously all the complaint stuff is much broader. But the voice of children and their experience is something we kind of draw out from a range of things, including complaints, but including obviously lots of things around feedback, participation groups, participation activity, the way we kind of gather information from children about their experience of services and what we're doing. So the analysis around those particular complaints, whilst it's not in this report, we do have that. And that's particularly sort of kind of pertinent. And it's really important in terms of, obviously, we commission NIAS to do that kind of, we've got issue-based advocacy commissioning sort of piece. So we do ensure that sort of children also have the opportunity to have somebody to kind of speak on their behalf. So just to assure you that that piece, that information, and that feeds back into, I talked at the beginning about everything in here looping back into pieces of work and design. So you then sort of moved on. I mean, obviously we've got quite a well-developed participation offer in terms of, and that's not just around what happens within sort of children's, but how we link into that kind of work across kind of communities. The SEND kind of sort of work does have some external kind of support, and obviously in the area SEND inspection for those children with SEND, there are other opportunities for their information, their feedback and their voice to be heard. So I won't go into all of it, but if that was the participation report and information about what we do with sort of children across the system, we have children in care kind of forums. We are developing our child in need and our child protection kind of sort of forums. We have youth groups. We have key kind of sort of project bits of work. We look at how we link with schools, and the wider part of the council has the things around the youth parliament, youth cabinet, and other kind of sort of developed kind of community groups for young people. Obviously, I would talk particularly about the children who are known and receiving a service from children's social care and targeted support. So there's quite a lot more to that piece, but I think just to give you that assurance around that, I think in terms of the data around the number of EHCPs that relate to autistic spectrum kind of sort of matters, and also around the kind of question you said at the end about schools, about support with EHCP referrals, I would go back to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, it's good. It's nice to hear your positive interpretation of the rise of education healthcare plans being reflective of an inclusive offer within our schools. And one of the things that did come up in the local area inspection, one of the things we shared with inspectors is that our educational outcomes for children with education health and care plans is actually consistently above national. So which is something to celebrate amidst all the other challenges that we are obviously experiencing. It's an interesting point that you raise in terms of Asperger's, and I know that now obviously the current terminology is around the autistic spectrum, and it's I mean, I think it's something that we would want to talk more about and I know we've made several references to the October report, but I feel that one of the challenges is obviously that children don't necessarily neatly fit in within any designation, and sometimes, you know, do have complex needs that span a number of different types of needs. So it's about how do we, and I guess the objective obviously of those education health and care plans is to set out how do we respond to enable those children to access education whilst meeting those needs. So I accept what you're saying in terms of that's a change, but I guess it's also a recognition that those needs can go across a number of different designations and don't necessarily fit. Children don't fit, do they, in those discrete definitions? So it's how do we create those environments to respond to those needs and make them inclusive, as you've referred to, working with our schools, obviously. But again, I'll make reference to the report in October, which I now think we've set ourselves up for, but we will be able to obviously spend more time in terms of the detail of our response.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tong and then finally Councillor Dieter.
I will try and stay very brief and just offer my thanks for this report. I think the information is incredibly useful. And although we're hopefully going to have it elaborated on a bit more next month, just having this information for now, I think allows members to make more informed decisions and know where the public's concern is. It's of course unfortunate to ever get a complaint. In a dream world, you wouldn't. However, you have acknowledged the really tough national context we are working within. So just to know to what extent issues with SEND services seem to trump other issues and know that needs to priority, I think allows people to make much better decisions. So, you know, it's great we'll get more information in the future, but I am glad we still have this now. And I think it's really important that we don't overlook how useful just having these sorts of things. They may not be the most detailed, but they provide the information in a very digestible way.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dieter.
Thank you, Chair. Just saying thanks again as well for the report. However, echoing what Councillor Bradnam said about, you know, you've identified the issue with capacity and needing to train staff and the new recruits. I was just wondering if you have a timeline for this, or maybe it's in the report in October, but it's just, it'll be useful to know, that's all.
Our aspiration is that we're working towards June next year, because it's important that we work with the workforce, you know, to make the improvements that we need to see. And obviously it is dependent on that decision to support the allocation of funding. So yeah, but that's our aspiration. But that doesn't mean that we're not on a daily basis making improvements through the Inclusion for All framework.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report and for the concentration on, you know, improvement. And it's a really informative report. I believe we have all reviewed and scrutinized to the extent we want to. So thank you very much. And it is 4:10, so we'll take a 10-minute break here. Thank you. Thank you very much. So shall we resume? Our last substantive item on the agenda is the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment for Children and Young People. So we're going to have this introduced by Richard Merrick. Welcome. And this is, no vote is required on this. It is a question of noting and obviously understanding and questioning the report. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Richard Merrick, and I'm a Specialty Registrar in Public Health in the Public Health team here at Cambridgeshire County Council. So by quick way of background.
Excuse me, I've had a request. Could you please bring the microphone nearer to you rather than you trying to get nearer to it? That is the key to success here.
Thank you for the tip. By way of background, a Joint Strategic Needs Assessment reviews the health needs of the local population to inform strategic planning across the system. It provides the data and evidence base to improve population health and reduce health inequalities. And this recent JSNA is about the health and well-being of children and young people in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and was approved by the Joint Health and Wellbeing Board and Integrated Care Partnership in January of this year. The JSNA makes 5 strategic recommendations as set out in the report, and each recommendation is accompanied by 5 or 6 system actions which are provided in the appendix. And these recommendations and actions have been developed from the evidence and shaped by those involved with children and young people, including the voluntary and community sector and parents and carers. I'd like to just give a few examples of how the Council and system partners are using the JSNA and implementing its recommendations. It's been used as evidence of collaboration and joint understanding for the Ofsted CQC local area SEND report inspection. It's been used to identify local needs and priorities for our Inclusion for All programme's inclusive partnerships strand. For example, improving earlier support for neurodiverse children by piloting a needs-led neurodevelopmental pathway in East Cambridgeshire, and for closer partnership working to improve support for children struggling to attend school due to social, emotional, or unmet SEND needs. It's also informed the recommissioning and design of services, including some of our services commissioned by Public Health. This has included expanding health promotion within the Healthy Schools service, including the Catch Your Breath programme, which is focused on prevention of smoking and vaping in young people, and which has been extended beyond just school settings to include further education settings and community settings. And it's also informed the recommissioning of a previously piloted service specifically focused on supporting families of children struggling to attend school due to their mental health and other complex needs, with the aim of improving school attendance. And it's very clearly shaped strategic planning and system prioritization. This includes the recently developed Public Health Strategic Plan, which has Best Start in Life as one of its 4 priority areas, with several actions flowing from this JSNA. And after the JSNA was presented at the Health and Wellbeing Board at the same time as the Mental Health JSNA, that led to a process of prioritization which selected children and young people's mental health as a key system focus for this year, which has led to a significant program of mental health service review and redesign for children and young people, which is being led by the ICB with support from Public Health. So as noted, the JSNA is being presented here to committee today for you to note the contents, and I recommend it to you as a useful resource for you to refer to and for you to ask others in the system about how they're using the information contained within it. And on that note, I note that it's publicly available on the Cambridgeshire Insight website via the link included in the report. So I'd just like to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed for the report and for coming here today to answer questions and present it. So do members have questions? Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much for your report. I'm struggling to understand, I think I understand it, the graph on page 92, which is the overweight or very overweight for year 6, and I'm very glad that we still are, we've extended funding for the to reduce children's likelihood of being overweight. But I just wanted to, if you could speak to me in English about, sorry, if you know what I mean, in not mathematical language, about the deprivation decile. I'm assuming 1 is the very worst level of deprivation, and is 10 no deprivation? Or I'm just trying to work out that x-axis on it.
That's a very good question. And in brief, this is based on a summary measure called the Index of Multiple Deprivation, which is an area level measure combining metrics across a variety of determinants of health, including employment and housing and access to services, and other related factors, which are then essentially combined into a summary metric, and sort of every area in the country is then ranked according to this metric, and then sort of cut up into 10% slices. So essentially it's a gradient on these measures between most and least deprived.
But what does 10 mean?
So that's the least deprived
okay,
on
yep,
that
that's great.
on that gradient.
So I'm sad actually to see the number of children who are very overweight by year 6, and I'm glad that we have programs to try and intervene at an early stage to try and improve that. And I just wonder if we have community, so I'm just sort of thinking around it. I know this isn't for you to necessarily to consider, but whether we have community interventions that can help people with good, healthy, basic cooking, and feeding families and that sort of thing. Anyway, thank you for explaining that to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Lowe.
Hello, thank you for the report. With the strategic recommendation 3 about non-attendance at school, with the actions, it's really saying about doing deep dives. Are we going to wait till we've done those deep dives to find out what the reason is, or are we going to be identifying other ways to educate children? Because I don't think school is the right environment for all children, and I think it is better to have more availability. For example, I think it's forest schools, outdoor education, and other things. I mean, what are we doing to find out the reasons? Because obviously you've also got young carers who have to take time off school to look after members of families. I just wanted to know, might be it's too early, but I really want to know what other alternatives we're looking at, rather than forcing children to go to school who obviously aren't going for a particular reason.
Thank you. So certainly a lot of work is undergoing in terms of the other actions identified here, and a lot of focus on identifying some of the barriers people have to staying in mainstream education, and that is very much the focus of the work. And I think in terms of your sort of wider question about children and families for which other options may be preferred options, I think sits outside this particular sphere of work, and I would defer to colleagues in the kind of children's education side on that front, I'm afraid. So I don't feel well placed to answer that.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Good afternoon. Just to touch on forest schools. Any school can have a provision of forest school. They just need a professionally trained member of staff to do that. So that is a really good option that could possibly be explored. While the JSNA identifies disparities between free school meal children and non-free school meal children, what I feel it is missing is how it will target explicitly the gap in terms of learning and progress that the children make, because that gap extends from early years to primary school to then secondary school. And then there's a lot of pressure placed on the establishments, the educators, the teachers, the heads of school, the heads of department to close that gap. So essentially, from the document that I've read, am I right in thinking that the JSNA will be addressing that gap in the form of targeting children's health in terms of housing, transport, employment, and helping to improve children's attendance? Is that the focus, or is there something missing?
I think part of what it's there to do is to sort of make clear the evidence that exists locally in terms of that gap, as you describe. And I think throughout the content and the actions, sort of implicit to that is the need to focus on that inequalities lens. And that's one way of looking at that. It's one metric that we have available with many imperfections. And as you say, it doesn't necessarily apply throughout someone's kind of school journey, but yet the actual, the issues remain. And so that's one way to sort of look at the data, so to speak, and focusing on inequalities and how we can target support to address the particular challenges or barriers faced by those who do, sit within either those more deprived areas or, a category of greater need like free school meals. I think it's there sort of implicitly rather than necessarily having, every step needed. And that's where this is a sort of a toolkit of information and recommendations for then system partners to take forward in their kind of strategic work in greater detail. So I don't know if that sort of helps with regard to that question, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Mr. Merrick? No, well, thank you very much indeed for a very helpful, very clear report. We note the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looking at the next item, the agenda plan, the training plan and appointments. We have as a final item, the committee agenda plan. Are there any further updates to the agenda plan, Tamar? No. And are there any comments on the committee training plan that anyone has? And members will note the local authority governor nominations and appointments for April to July as detailed in Appendix 2, including our own Councillor Goodliff, I believe. That brings us to the end of today's business. We'll next meet on the 7th of October. Thank you very much, and this meeting's now closed.